So there's a saying in education and like parenting that kids know how to be respectful, but choose not to be. Sorry, that gets a hard disagree from me because back in the 1900s, aka the golden days, once upon a time, respect was something that was like discussed in the home and like taught by parents, and it also looked different than it does today. You don't need a PhD in sociology to understand that that is not the standard anymore. That is not happening on the regular in general in homes anymore. So you better believe that that's going to affect us in our classrooms. One more thing to add to our plates, right? But we're going to talk about like realistic, sustainable ways to build like a gorgeous little community of respect, a culture of respect in your classrooms. A classroom that actually feels like a community instead of just like yelling at our classes that we're a family. Because over here, we're about that life. We're not yelling at our kids and just like expecting it to happen. We are making moves. We're taking action. Our actions are doing the speaking for us. So we're gonna break down morning meeting, yes, even with big kids. We're gonna talk about like realistic ways that restorative practices actually look in the classroom. Yes, we still give consequences. We're gonna talk about student jobs, parent relationships, ways to make sure that students feel like they're heard and have a voice in your classroom without adding more onto our plates. So whether you have time to do morning meeting religiously every single day, or you have 8 blocks of 14-year-olds all day, whether your families, the communities around your school like absolutely despise teachers and there's just a very like fraught relationship between home and school, we are going to make this work, honey. So obviously my school of thought is very like restorative practices and responsive classroom heavy. And if you're here, you probably have the same mindset. I'm not going to get into like the whole philosophy because it takes like, quite a bit of like professional development and like reading and learning about it. I have lots of book recs for you guys. But long story short, with the kids that we are being given these days, with the ass load of standards that we're supposed to be teaching them, with all the things that are now our responsibility, we're basically pouring all of those things into like a bottle with the lid on it. Being responsive to our students is a way to like open that lid, let them be like more receptive to the things that we're teaching them. Because if you're here, you already understand, you already know, you agree with me. It is like in your bones that if kids aren't feeling like emotionally safe in general, if they're not feeling supported, if they're not feeling heard, if they feel like you don't like them, they're not gonna learn, like period. They're not gonna cooperate, they're not gonna behave for you. They're just gonna make your life a lot more difficult and their lives more difficult. And over here, we're finding joy in teaching again. We want to like our jobs, right? So let's get into community building. So in the first week of school, the first 2 weeks of school, obviously this is a really important time period to like lay that foundation. I'm very blessed, very lucky that at my campus, well, one, we do this out of need, like out of necessity, but we have 2 weeks where we're like not really supposed to start our pacing calendar. So yes, that does put us very behind in pacing, but it doesn't matter because before, even whenever we did start our curriculum right away, we would still wind up late because our behaviors were so bad. So what we wound up doing, what my principal said was, first week is community building and routines and procedures. Second week is like rolling your routines and procedures into your curriculum, teaching how to do reading workshop, teaching how to do math workshop. And like, if you're at a campus where your students are needy in terms of like socialization, they're needy in terms of like emotional regulation, they're needy in terms of like food scarcity, finances, they need support, they need structure, they need routines, they need expectations to thrive. You're gonna need to have like the first week or two where you're not jumping into your science lessons. You're not cracking open social studies textbooks. Like, I'm sorry. You can do it, but it's gonna hurt you later down the road. And like, I'm sorry, but that's just some of the tough love that you can expect over here. I do it because I care. I want you and your kids to be successful. Okay, so let's talk about morning meeting on the first day of school. So I have 5th graders, so obviously they're, very middle school vibes, but they're still kids. So on the first day of school, my kids come into the room and they work on like silent, independent, calm work with like, it's like a packet with like tons of different options. I will link that in the description for you guys if you're interested in that. I've used it for years because it works great. It's a great way to like ease your kids into the day. So I put up a visual timer on the board and for about like 15-20 minutes. And when that timer goes up, we jump right to our first morning meeting. On the first day of school, I'm not like introducing our expectations. Like in that first morning meeting, that first time that we gather and meet, I'm not gonna hit them with some rules from morning meeting. Instead, the first one that I do that morning is we do like a get to know you activity. Mine is nothing groundbreaking, but it is something that I have found over the years works for me because it just fits my personality, it fits my style, it fits my teaching style. It's structured, it gives kids choice, it helps them feel comfortable. And it's just this Skittles activity that I found on Pinterest a few years ago. I think it's actually from Scholastic. And the way I do it is I call my student groups down to the floor. I direct them, to sit in a circle the way that I want them to. I join them as well on the floor in the circle. I pass out those little fun size packs of Skittles. Their instructions are not to touch them, not to open them. I have this chart posted. I have one of those low ones that sits like on like a tripod thing on the floor with me that has their options. I read over it with them and I give them instructions to choose which one they want to answer. And that's the Skittle that they're gonna pull out of their bag. Again, it's not revolutionary, but it's just very structured. It gives kids a snack. It helps them feel at ease. It provides them with choices, because at this point we know it's not great to ask kids like what they did over the summer, because that's not like applicable to all of our students. I have them show me a thumb on their chest whenever they have made their choice of which question they want to answer, and they have an answer in their heads. I've said it before, I always prefer thumbs on the chest whenever they're ready instead of hands up, because it doesn't feel so like intimidating or like pressuring the other kids to hurry up. It's just kind of like a low stakes way to show that they're ready. This takes some self-control. We all open our bags of Skittles. We choose the color of the Skittle that matches the one that the question that we want to answer. And I always model for them. And then we go sequentially. So like just moving in order around the circle. And then after each person shares, that person can eat their Skittles. Oh, and obviously whenever they're sharing, they also like say their name. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm going to answer something I'm looking forward to this year. And then they share. Then they eat their Skittle, pass to the next person. Once everyone has shared, I tell them that we can all eat our Skittles right now. So they're kind of like snacking and listening to me, and I'm giving them directions for what they're gonna do next. After we do like our very first morning meeting, this is still like the first 30 minutes of the first day of school. That's a lot. So I'm about to send them over to their desks to go work on like some independent work so that I can start like cracking on school supplies or doing attendance or just like getting my life together for the first day in general. I know you guys are probably like, wait, I wanted to talk about morning meeting. That didn't tell me what I want to know about morning meeting. I'm going to save that for just a second. Okay, it has its own section. Morning meeting has its own section on this video. Some other things that I do in like the first day, the first week of school that are like community building activities. This book has lots of great tips and little activities that you can do, and they break them up by like primary and then like 3rd through 6th grade. This book is from like the last century, the 1900s. So some of them do feel a little bit outdated, but you know, we can always tweak it. And I think it's still kind of good to just have like that old school feel in your classroom sometimes. I do a house of cards activity where students have to get together and like in little groups, and they have to write a commonality that everyone has in that group on an index card before they can use it to build a house of cards out of those index cards. I've talked about this before. It's our details flower. Again, I know it's nothing like groundbreaking, but we use depth and complexity icons at my campus. So every year we do one of these. And this is like the model that I used. I go over this in my success criteria video, which is, I believe, 2 videos back. I'll link it in the description for you guys. So not only is this like great independent work for them to do during the first few days of school, you can teach them how to do independent work. You can teach them how to use your shared supplies, your colored pencils. We also, once these are finished, we bring them to the floor for a morning meeting and use these to like introduce ourselves. And then they make like a nice display in our classroom. We do like a find someone who activity where kids just like mill about the classroom, finding somebody who matches certain criteria, and they write their names in, and then we come together and share. There's like a bingo in that back to school packet that I mentioned. There's lots of different like get to know you pages in that back to school packet. There's one that's like where kids make predictions about their teacher. Those are all great to like do as a group or come together for morning meeting to share your answers. This book also has a activity called like hopes and dreams. I know the name is like so corny, so cringy, but it actually is like a really good activity. And it comes with like a little printable page that you can give to your students, and it's great for creating classroom rules. It's also great for like having rich discussions with your students about like what they hope to achieve this school year and like what went wrong last year and how you can take those things to make like classroom rules. This also has another really cute activity where students create like a symbol to represent like one of their goals for the year. They write their symbol on like a little square piece of paper and it makes like a quilt. Such a cute activity. If you're like, I don't want to buy this whole book, I don't want to do all that, all the things that I'm talking about I have on my website, and it's called the Morning Meeting Starter Guide. So I will also link that in the description for you guys. I have it in very like simple, concise language. Like I took this and made it like, how does it actually look in your classroom? Something else I also prioritize in the first few weeks of school comes from this book, is finding tons of opportunities for students to like put their personal touches, their work, their names, their decorations around our classroom. So that book talks about like why that's important and like different ways to do that. But also there's a creator, she's on Instagram. She did a post like years ago and it always stuck with me. In fact, it was one of those things that like turned my teacher brain ship a different way and helped me be like a better teacher, in my opinion. She talked about how she was at a campus where they weren't allowed to put up store-bought anything. I'm talking even border around their bulletin boards. It had to be like the butcher paper from the workroom, like the colored kind, and they would like scrunch it together and like use that for their bulletin board border. Crazy, right? And like that sounds like a nightmare. But what wound up happening was like she showed pictures around her classroom where she did like She had a wall where all of her students got to bring in pictures of like their family. And so they had like a family wall. It was so cute. Of course, she also said they had like full access to a color printer. The alphabet strip on the wall was students like practicing their handwriting. And so they had like perfectly modeled student handwritten letters like that she had pieced together to make the alphabet strip across the top of her board. And like, obviously that's extreme, but the things that I always do in my classroom is my students always make a name tag for their cubby. They make a name tag for their book box. They make a name tag for their backpack hook. We decorate our title pages and all of our notebooks. Tons of opportunities for them to like put their work, their touches around our classroom. I did a birthday wall where I had all of my students who had birthdays in October get together. They held up a sign that said October. I took a picture and we posted it on a wall. And then throughout the year, I'm like during planning, finding ways where I can have students create something to hang up in our classrooms that we can use like as a resource. So in my recent years, it was math, science, social studies. So science, we had like biomes, posters, and food webs that students could reference throughout the year. We represented how decimals look on decimal grids along with like different ways to write that decimal, you know, like standard form, expanded notation, the money amount. These are all things that like you have to put up anyway. So it's nice for your students to create them. And then like your room is like so student centered. It's gorgeous. I also had a year where one of the choice boards that I made was like a drawing choice board and my students were like obsessed. And so every Friday they would like crank out all of these like really great drawings and we wound up putting them all over the back of our door. And so our classroom door was full of like weird little fifth grader drawings. Stitch and like The Nightmare Before Christmas really represented the group of kids that I had. And like I said, none of these activities are like groundbreaking, but it's just stuff that like really worked for me. If you're not liking like the get to know you or back to school activities that I'm telling you, like talk to your teammates, talk to your mentor teachers, use Chat GPT, scroll on social media. But like the main takeaways that I want you to like glean from, not glean, that's what upper admin says. The main takeaways that I want you guys to get from like these examples that I'm showing you is that it's really important to have like student-centered work around your room, community building activities, and like student input, like their voice is heard in your classroom. Does that make sense? I apologize for the upper admin jargon. Okay, so let's talk about like how I do morning meeting. This is the book that I was given. It is very outdated. I did use it. You can see that I've like marked it up pretty good. And this is like the traditional morning meeting format. Morning meeting was required at my campus. So it took me a long time to a very tense relationship with morning meeting. I hated morning meeting. It took me a long time to figure out how to make this work for me and my kids. Like we're not singing morning meeting jingles with the fifth graders every morning. That's not, So I used this chart and I had this hung up like for most of the school year. So this is the format that I use. We always started with like news/housekeeping things, you know, whether we had guidance lesson that day, it was a 4-day week. We would do our greeting or our opener, which is like, you know, where they say good morning, or I ask them like a very simple, like close-ended question and we would go around sequentially so that everyone had a chance to share. Then the bulk of our morning meeting was like our activity or like a lesson or a discussion that we were having, which like I said, I wrote think and share because it was very student-centered. I would ask a question, they would generate ideas. I was just like facilitating. And then the wrap up or the closer was usually like some accountability piece, like something that they had to say that they were going to do, something that they learned from the day. They kind of like wrapped up their thinking, if that makes sense. Like I said, I had a very like tense relationship with morning meeting. Those morning meeting like slide bundles did not work for me. I did not like those. I felt like they were so shallow. Like there were so many cute ones. And I know they can work for like some teachers, but to me, it felt like a waste of time. It felt like a waste of time talking about which football team do you like better or which ice cream do you like better, watching a video about grid. Like they didn't hit for me. It's not what I was looking for. And it also wasn't benefiting my classroom. Do you know what I mean? Like that, like what we were doing in morning meeting did not show up anywhere later in my classroom. My kids were still bad as hell. They were still disrespectful. They still didn't care about anything in our classroom. Like it wasn't giving me what I needed. And like I said, we're about that life over here. So this book, a great book. You guys can see that I've like marked it up everywhere. I have read this book. I read this book every summer. He just does a great job. He refers to like, I think it's either middle schoolers or high schoolers, but if you're a teacher of like, I would even say like second grade, this can still be applicable. This is getting your kids to solve problems around the classroom. And that's what we wound up doing for most of our morning meetings. This book is so good. I cannot recommend it enough. Like, I just love it. This says blueprint for shifting your mindset from punitive to proactive. And like, I didn't like use this, but it just gives like great new mindset shifts. So I basically took that, what I learned from that book, what I learned from my restorative practices training that we will talk about later in this video, and morning meeting, and like blended it all together to make what works for me. And so I'm just gonna give you guys like the bones, the very basic like format for how this worked for me in my classroom. And I guarantee this will feel like a more meaningful use of your time, you know? Okay, so later in the day on the first day of school, usually like in the afternoon, I introduce like how we're gonna do morning meeting. I say like, this is morning meeting. We're gonna learn how to do morning meeting. Our purpose of morning meeting is for us to like, you know, build social, emotional intelligence and skills. We kind of talk about like what that means. It's going to help us solve problems and feel like a community. And it's a chance for us to like check in each morning. I also have with me a predetermined like list of norms or expectations that I want my students to arrive at the end of morning meeting. They're going to come up with the list, but I already have like an idea of some things that are important to me just in case they like miss something. And just like I said in my success criteria video, you're going to want to think about like, what are some things that like went wrong in morning meetings before? What are some things that you don't want to happen in morning meeting? I don't like when kids sit together in like groups of friends, like little like insular pockets of the girlies, boys who like to get each other off topic or off task. Like that's not helping morning meeting at all. That's not helping us build a community. That's instead making like little cliques, little pockets. Fifth graders love like opting out of morning meeting with their bodies and like their body language, like leaning back, closing their eyes, putting their heads down. So obviously I came up with some expectations that have to do with that. Kids talking over each other, side conversations, overlapping conversations. Obviously that's a problem. So I came up with a norm on my own that is going to address that. But I'm gonna let my kids arrive at those conclusions and I'm gonna kind of like guide them along the way. So our opener is on the first day of school. This is later in the day, so we like, you know, are somewhat familiar with each other. Our opener, which is the goal of the opener, is for everyone to share. It's like a one-word answer. It's very brief, you know, it's just to help us practice like public speaking and greeting one another. So my opener for this morning meeting where I'm introducing our norms is say your name and say a word that describes how you're feeling today. And on the first day of school, I feel good, I feel bad, I feel tired, I feel excited. I hate that. So I have like a little basket that I keep in my morning meeting area of like some resources, like some anchors that I can use. And so this I'll slap up on the document camera for kids to reference. I can't remember where I got this. This is my talking piece. It is a Kodiak grizzly bear claw. It's obviously not a real one, it's a replica, but the kids think it's cool, it's easy to pass. So we're gonna move sequentially. I go first. Sequentially, I mean like we're going around the circle one by one. Occasionally you'll have a kid that like is terrified, mortified, whatever, neurodivergent, they want to opt out. The goal throughout the year is for all the kids to participate in the opener. Make some type of progress in the way that you like present yourself in the opener, okay? So like I said, I would always go first. So I would say something like, good afternoon, my name is Miss Phillips, and today I am feeling optimistic. And I'll pass the talking piece. The next person goes. So once we do the opener, that's whenever we move into like the activity or the lesson or the discussion. And so I'll say something like, you know, the point of morning meeting is, you know, what I already said earlier in this video. I want you guys to think about what are some ways that you like to feel seen or heard. Take some think time and show me a thumb when you're ready, when you have an example. You're gonna get things like, I don't like when people interrupt me. I don't feel heard when people interrupt me. So like, let me finish. Kids might say something like, I like when you're like looking at me, like you're not doing something else. You're not distracted. Like you're giving me your attention. A lot of times their answers are not this like elaborate or like developed. And so I'll kind of help them or like restate what they're saying and like add on or clarify a little bit. I do those questions non-sequentially. So we're not going in a circle on that one. I'm taking volunteers. So they show me their thumb to show that they're ready. When I see that a lot of kids have ideas with their thumbs, I'll say, okay, you guys can raise your hands. And then I use the talking piece. I slide it across the carpet. Only the person who has the talking piece can share. Everyone else puts their hands down while someone is sharing. And then I'm also recording their responses either on like, you know, a clipboard or sticky notes while they're sharing. Once a kid shares the response, they choose somebody else by saying their name. On the first day of school, we talk about how like, if you can't remember their name, you could just say, what was your name again? Okay, Aiden. And they pass it using their name. So once I've squeezed out a decent amount of ideas, I'll read through the things that they said, and then we'll come up with rules together. So this is the chart that I always come up with. Again, these are ones that I have like predetermined ahead of time based on like things I don't want to happen. So like the first one, fill in the next open seat. They didn't really care about that one. That one was actually me. So unfortunately I had to start that one. Something that bothers me in morning meeting or some ways that I don't feel seen or heard is if there's side conversations. And a lot of times that will happen when kids are sitting together, like with their friends, side conversations happen. So I want everyone to get to know each other really well. And so we need to sit by different people almost every day. When people said like, don't ignore me or don't be distracted or don't act like, you know, you don't care about what I have to say, I'll say like, okay, sometimes our body language shows that. So if someone's like slumped back and has their eyes closed and is like sitting like this, that shows they don't really care what you have to say. So that's where this dark blue and green expectations come from. I always say like a safe, calm, and engaged body, because it's hard to make fifth graders sit like with their legs crossed and like sitting up. So engaged body, I just mean like, is kind of sitting up. We're not laying back on our elbows. We're definitely not laying down. We're not laying on our stomachs. Like that, you're not engaged. You're like, checking out at that point. The orange one, we do a whole morning meeting lesson on that one. And then we work on it like throughout the year, because as you guys know, I also greet my students every time they come into my room, all of my classes at my door. And so we also practice that. I have a lesson on that in the morning meeting starter guide that is linked in the description. A big one for me is keeping hands down while other people are speaking, because we talk about how like data shows, science shows that like if your hand is up while someone else is speaking, your brain is just waiting for them to stop talking so that you can share. You're not actually listening. Like, it's rude. So once we've made our charts, like I make this with them. I'm writing this like, while they're sitting there with me on the floor. We do our wrap up. Like I said, it's a good accountability piece, a way to like solidify their learning for the day. So our wrap up question would be like what's something that you need to feel successful in morning meeting? And it's hard for them to like generate their own ideas. So I say like, which one of these like speaks to you the most? Which one of these things from our chart speaks to you the most? Or is there anything that we missed? I always give them think time, show me a thumb when they're ready. And then, like I said, especially early in the year, I model and I'll say something that I really need, something that helps me not interrupt, is respecting the talking piece. So that's one thing that will help me really feel successful in morning meeting. And then we go sequentially around the circle. Okay, so let's get into restorative practices and like how I use that in my classroom. I am not like fully drinking the restorative practices Kool-Aid. I think there are like magical pieces to that like really, really resonate when you have groups that struggle with behavior. But like the side of the internet that talks about restorative practices and like not giving consequences and things like that, I'm not on that end of the spectrum. I'm just somewhere in the middle, In a nutshell, restorative practices is basically like using questions and discussions to like heal relationships, improve behavior, improve social interactions. So crash course in restorative practices, there's basically like these questions that you ask, like both the person who was offended and the offender. And it's very simple. It's like, what happened? What were you thinking, or how were you feeling when it happened? Who do you think was affected by this? What harm has been done? What do you need to do to fix this? What are you going to do differently next time? Like really obvious questions, right? But like I remember whenever my campus rolled this out like several years ago, we joked about those questions because they like printed them out on like a little label and we put them on the back of like our ID badges so that we would like always have those questions. And like you don't use those questions. Like if a kid like hits another kid in the face at recess with a basketball, we joke about being like flipping through our cards like, okay, how were you feeling when that happened? Okay, and who do you think was damaged in this relation? Like that's not realistic, right? So let's talk about how I make this like look realistically in my classroom, what it does for like relationships, how I use it to like build community, and then like where is its place in morning meeting. So let's use two scenarios. One that's kind of like a more like serious behavioral issue, and then another situation where it's like those everyday like little nagging things, those little spot fires that we constantly have in the classroom. So scenario one, true story, my student teacher was cussed out by one of my new students. First of all, we're going to deal with this later. We're not having a discussion right then when the student is like freaking out and my student teacher's crying. We're going to handle this like the next day or after school, something when everyone has like the dust has settled. So the conversation was something like this. I'm talking to the student first. I'm going to talk to them and like let them go through their whole thing. And then I'm going to go to my student teacher and let her go through her whole thing. And then we kind of come together. I like facilitate them in that way. Okay. So the student who did the cussing. Oh my God, what happened? I told your student teacher to blah, 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 blah. She was in my face and da, 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 da. Instead of me being like, and what were you thinking or feeling at the time? Realistically, it was something like this. Oh my God, so you cussed at her? Yeah, she was in my face and I was already like in a bad mood. Oh my God, how do you think Miss So-and-so feels getting cussed at by a 10-year-old? The student says, bad. Okay, so what are you gonna do differently next time? Like, is there anything you need to do to make this right? The student says something like, apologize. Like, that's a crappy answer, but I'm gonna address that later. And yeah, next time you're mad and a teacher like redirects you, what are you gonna do differently next time? Just do it. We all know that it's not fixed, right? So now I would go over to my student teacher, like we're standing the three of us together, letting each other talk. So now it's her turn. Oh my gosh, Miss So-and-so, what happened? She tells her side of the story. Dang, and how did that affect you? Right, I bet. Is there anything that you need from a student friend here to, move forward with this? Do you need time? She said an apology. Would an apology help? Do you just need like some space? Do you guys want to have like a private discussion away from me? And then that's where I can kind of start like facilitating things. I could turn to my student and say like, See, she was really upset. She didn't want to come to work today because she says that people don't talk to her like that ever. And she had a 10-year-old talking to her like that. It sounds like Miss So-and-so would probably just like to have a one-on-one conversation with you without me involved. Does that sound okay? Okay, do you need anything from me right now? Okay, well, I'm gonna let you guys talk. I'll come check on y'all in just a few minutes, okay? And then I leave. I'll follow up like individually with each of them later. And it turned out like they had a great relationship moving forward. It was fine. Did that solve the students' behaviors moving forward? No. But did she cuss out a teacher again? I actually think she did, but she didn't cuss out this teacher or me, so. Okay, so then scenario 2, which is just like the little spot fires, which hopefully if you've been watching the summer series, you have very minimal spot fires in your classroom, just like those little things that you're just like constantly trying to put out like whack-a-mole. Hopefully you have less of those this year because you've been watching the summer series, you've been taking it to heart, you've been putting these things into practice, like you're gonna slay this school year. But it still happens, right? So let's say we have a group of 4 kids working in the classroom, 2 start arguing, the paper gets ripped, someone starts yelling, crying, whatever. So this is a situation where I don't really need to wait for them to calm down. Like we're working right now and this is like a short-term problem, like it needs to be solved right now. So the kid who rips the paper, who's like freaking out, is probably something like, I was supposed to be working on the vocab section and none of them will let me work on my section and I was just trying to blah, 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 blah. Of course, the other kid is trying to like defend themselves and talk over them. You need to like stand your ground and be like, you'll have your chance to talk. So I let them finish their side of the story. Okay, so what wound up happening? I was trying to get the paper and it ripped. Did you ask to get the paper like this? Hey guys, I've asked you a few times, can I get the paper to do my section, please? I'm falling behind. No, because like that's the behavior that you would want to see, like them asking respectfully, you know, using their words. The other kids should be hearing that and trying to work together, especially if you've been using those cooperative group roles that I mentioned in one of my other videos this summer. So now I let the other kid talk. So what happened? He grabbed the paper and ripped it away from us while we were all still working. So I'm like in problem solving mode. Okay, so when you guys are all working on your individual sections on the paper, were you guys all having your own space and leaving him room to do his vocab section? They probably weren't. He might admit they weren't. Did he ask you guys nicely to have room? Well, he did it first, but then he started arguing. Okay, so what can we do differently next time? And then like to move forward, I might say something like, you know, do you need to work on your own separate piece today? And then like we can copy that over tomorrow, or are you gonna be able to work together for the rest of the class period? Like what do we need to move forward? Do we need to apologize? How are we gonna fix the ripped paper? Like it's about mending relationships, letting the kids talk. I'm just there facilitating, asking these guiding questions. I've talked about this in the consequences video. What we're not doing over here on this page, what we're not doing, teacher baddies, is we're not lecturing, we're not nagging, we're not fussing at the kids. We're letting them problem solve. We're asking the right questions to get them where they need to be, because that's ultimately what's gonna improve their behavior, right? So now we can talk about blending that restorative practices into morning meeting, because I don't like the slides. I don't like the 1990s book for kindergartners. Like I'm not using all the things out of here. I kind of blended them together to get like my own like effective, feels good, kids like it type of morning meeting, okay? So I'm still using the same format for my morning meetings. My greeting and my opener is kind of like the same thing. I'm usually asking, like I said, a closed question. So like, it's just like a 1-word answer or a short phrase for an answer, a color that represents how you're feeling today, an animal that represents how you're feeling today, the best part of your week so far. And then the discussion lesson activity piece is usually us discussing like some type of like problem that we're having in the classroom or some type of skill that I need them to build. So like I have a great lesson on how to prepare for a substitute. I also have a lesson for how to fix things when things have gone wrong with a substitute. I have a lot of lessons on like respect, what is respect, how we like to be respected, how respect looks like in the classroom versus every other area of your life, like situational respect. What does respect look, sound, and feel like in the classroom? Giving great greetings, like tone of voice and eye contact, and like working on those things. Even for my neurodivergent friends, like those are things that we work on throughout the year. But like in general, I'm using this restorative practices mindset in my morning meetings to solve problems that we're having in the classroom. So like one of my favorite lessons to teach respect, I have it in my morning meeting starter guide that it is linked in my description for you guys, along with tons of tips about morning meeting, a bunch of the lessons that I use, 4 pages of questions that you can use for morning meeting that'll like carry you throughout the year. But let me show you guys my lesson on like that I use at the beginning of the year for like how I teach respect, and it turns into like a beautiful anchor chart. This group did not do such a great job on this anchor chart, but it's the only one I have a picture of. So on teaching my students respect, like I said at the beginning of this, I think students these days like are not explicitly taught respect or implicitly taught respect, but like our generation of teachers is just, we're used to kids being respectful and they're not these days. So we have to teach them. So my opening question, my greeting is saying good morning, saying our name, and thinking about someone that we respect, sharing the name of someone that we respect. So I always give them a little bit of think time. Let me get my morning meeting talking piece. And notice at this point, I have not given a definition of respect. It's kind of like a little pre-assessment on what my students know so far about respect. Take a drink every time I say respect in this video. So especially at the beginning of the year, I like to model by going first. And I'll tell my students, okay, I'm gonna model. I want you guys to copy my greeting and say who you respect. And then we're gonna pass the talking piece to the next person. Remember, we place it gently in their hand. We make eye contact. If I've already done a morning meeting lesson over greetings, great. If I haven't, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time there. Good morning, my name is Miss Phillips, and somebody that I respect is my grandma. Good morning, so-and-so, and I pass it to the next person. That's our opener. It takes like 5 minutes going around the circle. So this is where I'm gonna do like a direct teach, and I'm gonna tell my students, okay, I'm gonna teach you guys about respect today. Some of you guys already know about respect. You have people in your lives that you respect, but we're gonna come together to discuss like what respect is gonna look like in our classroom. So respect is basically treating people, places, things, yourself like they matter. So 2 questions, very briefly. I say this is non-sequential because we're not going in a circle. I'm looking for thumbs, and then I'm calling on volunteers whenever I see, a lot of thumbs around my circle. So the question I'll start with, I want you guys to think about, how do you feel? What are some emotions you feel when you feel disrespected? Give them lots of think time. Show me a thumb when you guys have a word, an emotion for how you feel when you feel disrespected. That one's very brief because obviously there's so many words for negative emotions. Okay, now this is where the anchor chart that we make is gonna come from. So I always have a pack of sticky notes with me and a marker, and I'm like writing fast as I can on these sticky notes as kids are sharing out their responses. And then I take all those sticky notes and I give them to a kid to make an anchor chart for us. Just copy what we wrote onto an anchor chart. Save this part for a title. You can make your own title, whatever you wanna do. How you choose that child, if you wanna rotate them, if it's your class secretary, whatever you wanna do. But the question I ask, like the meaty question that I'm gonna ask is, what are some ways that you feel respected? You might even need to think about what are some things that have happened to you that made you feel disrespected. So I have that big pack of sticky notes with all the students' ideas written down. And to wrap up, I'm gonna quickly read through the sticky notes. Okay, so some ways that we're gonna have on our chart that show that Miss Phillips' class, all of us like to be respected. We like, reading them out. And then I'm gonna have them like use the next few days to make that chart. And then you better believe we're gonna hang it up in our classroom all year long. And then like to wrap up your morning meeting, this is usually sequentially. I want to hear from everybody. It's that accountability piece. I want you guys to think about what is something that you can do today to show respect to your classmates. Okay, so I also use this book and that restorative practices mindset of like, healing damage that has been done to solve problems. So like a lot of our morning meetings have turned into things like, a few years ago, I don't know if y'all had this, a few years ago, we had this game that was going on at recess where kids would slap each other on the back of the neck and tell them to edge up. Of course, y'all know how it goes. The slapping goes too far. It's not, it turned into like hitting, and then it turned into like, yeah, you know how it goes. So that was our morning meeting. Like, we have this issue that's happening at recess. Like, why is this a problem? Yeah, it goes too far. Yeah, kids are getting hurt. Yeah, some kids like it, but some kids don't. Who does this affect? How does this affect us? Do you know how much paperwork I have to do when you guys are hitting each other? Yes, thank you. What can we do to fix this? What are some things that we could do at recess instead? What are our next steps moving forward? What's gonna happen if we are playing the edge up game? No, oh my God, I just remembered. The game was not called Edge Up. The game was called I Like Your Cut, G. That was the game. But I've also used this like all the time for any little problem I was having in the classroom. Kids were coming to school without their Chromebooks being charged. Homework was an issue. Hallway behaviors, because I've said before at my campus, hallway was very, very strict. Problems in art, problems in PE and specials classes. I use that same format. Guys, we're having this problem. Why is this a problem? Like, what's going on? Who does this affect? How is this affecting them? Anybody else this is affecting? Okay, so what are we gonna do to fix this? And every single time I write those things down, those kids are saying on sticky notes, right? As fast as I can. Each kid's response gets a sticky note. And then I have a little stack of sticky notes and we turn that into an anchor chart. Or sometimes if we don't have the time for that, I'll make like a quick chart right here. This one was about earbuds. We could not keep up with our class set of earbuds. I wish I had a picture of this one. One time we did one over, so during assemblies, 5th graders sit at the back as always, and the 5th graders could never see during assemblies because the kids in front of them obviously would get up on their knees. So we had a morning meeting about how to make our assemblies better. And you better believe that my students made multiple anchor charts. Each table group made an anchor chart that we displayed in our auditorium, our cafeteria, to reinforce those expectations. We're solving problems out here. We're changing the world, or the school. Okay, another thing I do is I use student jobs in my classroom. I have a job for every single one of my students. I have done this since my second year of teaching and I have never looked back. And these are jobs that actually like take stuff off my plate. Yes, in the beginning of the year, you do have to like invest some time. You will get that return on investment, I promise. This is one of those things that's gonna have your classroom running by October, running itself. Having a job for everybody builds community. And so my jobs include things like secretary, phone operator, attendance clerk, electrician, directional specialist, that's the line leader, materials manager, gardener to water my plants, cafeteria staff that wipes up the cafeteria tables after we leave lunch. Like any task that I have around the classroom that a child can handle, that's gonna be a job. I have a substitute for whenever someone's absent and they do their job. Yes, all of my jobs resources is available on my website. I'll link it in the description for you guys. So the way I do it is I roll it out like around week 2 using like slides. And so I show them like a slide presentation and it says like, you know, keep in mind what jobs might be a good fit for you and what jobs might not. It tells them each job with like the qualifications, like what are like some characteristics of a student that would make them great for that job, and as well as having like the job description. I wait till week 2 because I kind of like know my students a little bit better. If I do it right away, I'm gonna give someone a job that they like probably can't handle, because I let my students apply for their jobs. They fill out job applications. They list their top choice as well as 2 backup choices. They say why they're the best person for that job, as well as they list a job that they absolutely do not want. It takes me about 30 minutes to an hour to assign these jobs. It's kind of like, you know, a chessboard. I'm like moving things around just right to make sure that everyone kind of gets what they need. Usually I am able to accommodate almost everybody's top 3 choices for their job. I give my students "you're hired" letters and I put them like face down on their desks whenever they come in the morning, and it says like, congrats, you're hired so-and-so, with their name as well as their job, like which job they got awarded, a brief job description. It tells them that they start immediately, what to do if they want to decline their job. It tells them that they're an important part of our community with my name signed, and they're so excited. It's like a big deal. Like I said, it does take a few weeks for the kinks to kind of like iron out, you know, reminding certain kids to do their jobs, taking the time to show certain kids. Like I just kind of find like little pockets of time where I can, oh, let me show you how to answer the phone really quickly. Here are times that you answer the phone. Here are times that you don't. Here's what you do if you need me. The person on the phone needs me. Here's what you do if someone's going home early. Just finding like little pockets of time to kind of like train them. That does take some time to iron out the kinks. But like I said, it's an investment and you will reap the rewards the rest of the year. My philosophy is having as much student created resources as possible. So of course I have my students make name tags with their job on it. Cute, colorful, has everyone's name, has everyone's job on there. I also have a roster where I write each kid's name that I keep behind my desk next to their job, where I also monitor strikes. Rarely do I have to give strikes, but it's 3 strikes and you're fired. Occasionally you get a kid who like literally does not give a crap about anything, or they just like can't get their lives together. They don't want me to work with them. They don't like wanna whatever. And that happens like once every 2-3 years. So that should not be the norm. A frequently asked question: no, I don't compensate them for their jobs. I used to. We used mykidsbank.org where they had like digital bank accounts, and we used that like as like a whole grade level, like for lots of different things. But after COVID, I stopped using it and I have not known a difference at all. I have not seen a difference in compensating them for their job versus not. So another frequently asked question is like, what if there's a job that nobody applies for? So whenever I'm going through that slides presentation to introduce the jobs to them, I tell them, okay, these are some of the jobs that everyone applies for. Everyone always applies for: secretary, directional specialist, phone operator. And if a lot of people apply for that job, the likelihood of you getting that job decreases, obviously. However, these are jobs that not very many people apply for. So if you apply for these jobs, the chances of you getting your first choice are going to increase. Like I said, I can usually like accommodate most kids' top 3 choices of their jobs. However, if someone does not apply for a job, I'll go ahead and print out the "you're hired" letter just with no student name on it. I'll bring the letter or 2 to a morning meeting and I'll say like, oh my gosh, we have this problem. No one applied for these 2 jobs and we really need so-and-so, like I'll take a volunteer. If a student's a hot mess and they never turned in their job application, they couldn't get it done in a reasonable amount of time, I have special letters that say like, you did not apply for a job. Here's the job that I'm offering you. Take it or leave it, in nicer words. And then students reapply for jobs every 9 weeks. Those are our quarters, so it happens 4 times a year. However, another frequently asked question, I've had years where they never changed jobs. They kept the same job all year because they couldn't handle it, or I couldn't handle it, or whatever. So my goal is every 9 weeks, every quarter. Okay, so let's talk about like parent or family relationships. So I'm gonna be transparent for a moment. Early on in my teaching career, I had a very like us versus them mentality. And you better believe that my relationships with parents were not great. Not a lot of positive interaction. Like it didn't feel good, and that's not good for the kids. Like that's not helping anybody. And it's like perpetuating this idea that's just been going around the last like decade or so that like we're the man, teachers are the man, the education system is the man, which like I'm not gonna get too like opinionated on here, but that's not serving anybody, okay? So here are 3 things that changed my mindset and then some action steps that I have taken in recent years to help like really improve my relationships from like an authentic, genuine place. So 1, I hate to say this, someone in upper admin, I don't know where I heard this, but someone in upper admin said to treat your parent relationships like customer service. That's horrible, right? Because we are certainly not at anyone's service. Like we are public servants, we are civil servants, but they're not our customers and we're not out there to please parents. We're working together to help students be successful. We're a team, we're a community. However, it did change that mindset for me. I don't need to answer the phone like ready to rock. Sure, a simple fix, yes, I can help you with that. So while I don't like endorse or co-sign to treat parents like with like a customer service mentality, that did shift something in me that we're not enemies. Parents and teachers are not enemies. I also think that mindset can be like born in like an environment, like a toxic school environment. So like be wary of that if like the people around you, the school that you're in kind of has that mentality. Red flag. Another thing that helped my parent relationships was having a child myself. But like, even if you're not a parent, think of like your nieces, your nephews, your siblings, you as a child. Would you want this adult treating your child that way? What support would you want from your teacher and your family to help you be successful in school when you were younger, you know? And then the last one is very heavy, but like once I really understood the broken system that we have and like the pressure and the tension that's put on families, that's like widening the gap, deepening the divide between schools and homes, that is to blame here. And social media certainly perpetuates that. Look at the school supply battle that's going on social media right now. Like this might have already existed, you know, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Social media has like exacerbated this and like pitted teachers and families against each other. So some things that I've done to combat that. My principal gives us time before school starts to call every family on our roster. Yes, it takes time. Yeah, you better believe I definitely chunk it up. Like I call 5 parents, like throughout the day. But yeah, I'm calling, I'm welcoming them. I ask them if there's anything I need to know, tell them I'm so excited to have them in our classroom, how they're getting home the first day of school. You already know that. Boom, you've already made some positive parent contact. Get the best phone number from them, how they like to be contacted. I also make contact throughout the year. I think those little things that you can buy, like those little postcards or little letters or printable things or whatever that say like, that are just like the little cutesy positive notes. I think those are great. Staple them in their agenda or their communication calendar or whatever. You guys know that I use a communication calendar, which is kind of just like a 1-page agenda. I love for no reason, like writing a positive note in there. So-and-so went up however many points on their MAP test, or has been a joy to have in class lately, or model student, or whatever it is. Make sure it's true. But like, I just love writing a positive note in there just to, you know, make that positive parent contact. It builds relationships. I also, pro tip, use Google Voice. So you can use it on your like actual device, like your computer, or you can have it on your phone. You can do both, but Google will give you an anonymous phone number and it's the same phone number every time. So you can call and text parents from Google Voice and they're not getting access to your personal phone number. They have a different number that stays the same, saved for you. So I text parents all the time. It's such a good way to make positive parent contact. We're sending pictures on the first day of school, like great first day of school, happy to have them in my class. Send that as a text, easy. Here's so-and-so getting an award for the first 9 weeks, easy. Here's so-and-so reading a book during sustained silent reading time today, easy. And like, what parent doesn't love getting pictures of their kid at school? Like that only happens in like daycare, pre-K. That doesn't really happen in elementary school, especially as you get older. So that is a great system. And you can also, parents are usually very receptive to text messages. Hey, can I call you in just a second? We're having a problem today. Whatever it is, like Google Voice is that it'll save your life. You want your positive communication, like your positive contact to outweigh the negative, like times a million, okay? Not because you're not like addressing things, but because you're making so much positive parent contact. Okay, so when you do have to make negative parent contact, the way you do it is huge. Please pick up the phone. Do not email. I used to think I liked emailing because it would give me like documentation. Just write on a sticky note what y'all talked about, or if you have a spreadsheet, great, do that too. You can just document what y'all talk about on the phone. No parent wants to get a blasting email that's like several paragraphs long about the struggles their child is having. Pick up the phone. My principal told me years ago to do that. My mentor teacher told me in my first year and I didn't listen to her. She's right. Picking up the phone is so much better for your relationships. 9 times out of 10, you will hang up the phone, glad that you talked to them. The conversation went well. You have a solution. You guys feel like a team. Email, you cannot always say that. If they're not answering, yeah, email them, text them, and say, hey, can I give you a call? What's the best number to reach you at? And then I believe it's episode 4. Again, I'll link this video in the description for you guys. My video about communication will tell you, it'll help you like say things exactly how they happened, very objectively. It gives you like pro tips on like effectively communicating behaviors. Because what we don't want is they're extremely disrespectful. They're constantly disrupting. We don't want our phone calls to go that way. We're going to use objective, exactly what happened, what expectation was broken, what they should have done, what you did before, like they got so many warnings. I had them sit over here, like I'll link that video for you guys. Okay, friend, and then remember, we are setting boundaries with that parent communication. In my district, we have 24 hours to respond, and that's 24 hours like within a weekday. If I get emailed at 4 o'clock on a Friday, they will get an email before 4 o'clock on a Monday. I'm not emailing over the weekend. I don't check my Parent Square or whatever app I have for parents to message me on the weekends or after school. I turn off my notifications and my badges for that. Keeping email on your phone. I know like things happen over the weekends or things happen like overnight and you need to check your email. I don't have it in my mail app. I go to like my web browser, open my mail on like Safari. That way I'm not getting any notifications, any badges, any icons, any dings, whatever from emails from my school. I'm protecting my peace. I've learned that the hard way. I had a teammate a few years ago who said, one of her biggest regrets was responding to emails, feeling like she needed to respond right away, whether it was Saturday at 9 a.m., yeah, or Tuesday at 11 when she's doing a lesson. And then she felt like she regretted it because she felt like that was the standard that she'd set. So that's what parents expected from her all year. Okay, you guys got a crash course in building a culture of respect, having a student-centered classroom, having a responsive classroom. If you guys want to do some reading, I have some book recommendations for you guys. Over on the Post-Dismissal Debrief, I'm going to give you guys some book recommendations. I'm also going to talk about a viral video that went viral in a negative way. Please don't go look for it. It was about behavior management red flags. I still stand by this video, but over on the Post-Dismissal Debrief, I'm going to like read you guys the script, exactly what I said, and defend myself. I don't know. But either way, this is behavior management red flags. If you are a teacher who does this, this, and this, bye is what I basically said in the video. So I'm gonna go talk about exactly what I said, what was said to me about it. Like I got destroyed, flayed by the internet. And then as always, we're just yapping. We're teammates, we're closing the door, we're turning off the lights, we are done with bus rider and car rider duty, and we are debriefing about our day, okay? So I hope to see you guys over there.